Hello friends, welcome to the Cool Vedas, that's Veda School. In the last video we saw how Pandu had tried convincing Kunti with the story of Sharadhandayana's daughter and also as to how Kunti politely denied Pandu's proposal by stating the story of Bhadra and Vishitaswa. You can find the link to the story in the description box. Today, let's see what Pandu does further to convince Kunti to beget children so as to continue his lineage. Now, this story has been mentioned in Sambhava Parva in Adi Parva. So, let's listen along and see what Pandu does. After hearing the story of Vishitaswa from Kunti, Pandu politely addressed her thus. He said, "O Kunti, what you have just said is quite true. Vishitasva indeed was equal unto the Devas themselves. But I shall now tell you about the practices of old times which was indicated by the illustrious rishis. O Kunti, women were not formerly confined within houses and depended on husbands and other relatives. They used to go about freely, enjoying themselves as best as they liked. They did not even adhere to their husbands faithfully, and yet they were not regarded as sinful, for that was the normalcy at those times. That same rule is followed by birds and animals even to this day. Without any exhibition of jealousy between partners, the birds and animals follow the same rule till date. The present practice, however, of women being confined to one husband for a lifetime had been established very late. I should tell you in detail who established this rule and why he did it so. There was a great rishi named Uddalaka. He had a son named Shwetaketu. It was this Shwetaketu who established the present practice of women being faithful to one husband for a lifetime. Hear me as I tell you the reason for it, O Kunti, said Pandu. Now, before we begin the story, let's know that in Chandogya Upanishad, there is a dialogue between this father and son, that is, between Uddalaka and Shwetaketu, where Uddalaka imparts enlightening knowledge to his loving son, including the meaning of the very famous verse Tattvamasi. It's very beautiful. Please find the link to a blog with this write up in the description box. It's very enlightening. By the way, the immense Guru Bhakti of this sage Uddalaka the father was among the very initial stories mentioned in Veda School series. Please find the link to the story in the description box or in the top left corner. Now let's get back to this story, to the present story. So, Pandu began his story thus. He said, long ago, in the ashram of Uddalaka, came a Brahmana visiting them. And it so happened that, in the presence of Shwetaketu's father, the Brahmana catching Shwetaketu's mother's hand, told her, "Let us go." And she followed the Brahmana. This action of the Brahmana surprised and angered the boy Shwetaketu. Seeing his mother caught by hand and taken away by a stranger, a different Brahmana made the loving son Shwetaketu very angry. Seeing his son disturbed, Uddalaka told him thus, "Don't be angry, my son. This is the practice sanctioned by the learned ones. The women of all orders are free to go as they wish. It is a rule, my son." The Rishi's son Shwetaketu, however, disapproved of this practice and established in the world the present rule regarding men and women. Thus, from that day, the existing practice became a rule among human beings, but not in other animals and birds, only the human beings. Accordingly, since the establishment of the present usage, it is sinful for women not to be faithful to their husbands. Women breaking the rule assigned by the rishi became guilty of slaying the embryo. And men too, violating a chaste and loving wife who has from her maidenhood observed the vow of purity, would become sinful too. The woman who refuses to raise offspring as commanded by her husband becomes equally sinful. Thus, O Kunti, today's practice of faithful partnership was only established by Shwetaketu in total disobedience of those ancient rules which was established by the great rishis. O dear one, continued Pandu, with an intention of giving her another example from history, he said, Oh Kunti, I have also heard that Madayanti, the wife of Saudhasa, was asked by her husband, who was unable to procreate, to raise her offspring by Niyoga. Niyoga means where the husband nominates another man to impregnate his wife. And the chaste wife Madayanti had approached Vasishtha for an offspring, and thus was she blessed with the illustrious son Ashmaka. And thus Madayanti had pleased her husband and brought prosperity to Saudhasa's lineage. The story of Saudhasa, also called Kalmashapada and Vasishtha, is narrated in detail in Chaitrarata Parva in Mahabharata. It's very interesting. We will read it as we reach there. The story of Kalmashapada. Now back to the story again. So Pandu continued with Kunti thus. He said, O Kunti, you don't know that we ourselves were begotten by our mothers with the help of Krishna Dvaipayana, and thus our race was saved from extinction by the Brahmana's grace. O faultless one, beholding all this precedence, please do what is right, with virtue always in your mind. As I am unable to have children, it becomes more of your duty to accept my request and beget children for my sake. Saying this, Pandu joined his palms and placed them on his head and requested her again to raise an offspring through a highly ascetic Brahmana. Kunti's heart melted at the sight of her husband. She could no longer deny Pandu his right to have an offspring. But what could she do? What are her options? Will she be able to give her husband children? Let's read along and find out. Please like, share, and subscribe our channel for more Mahabharata stories. Do not forget to press the bell icon. Thank you. Namaste.